Okay.
Oh, I feel very honoured.
So, welcome everybody to our first Feminist Fusion chats, and we are going to be hosted this evening by myself, Roz, and
Gabby.
Okay, and with us this evening we have some fabulous special guests. We have Annie Broadbent, active member of the Devon Fawcett Society, and Annie works with women and men to achieve gender parity in political, social and economic terms using mentoring, coaching, workshops, conferences and talks. We also have this evening Erin Osborne. She's a singer-songwriter from Ohio, working with and inspiring young people from disadvantaged backgrounds through music and performance. And we also have Tamara Sitterburn, and she's a mother and educator with qualifications in psychology and anthropology and a vast experience in multi-ethnic backgrounds. So we are going to be discussing the topic of feminism, past and present. So we'll be talking about first wave feminism, second wave feminism, third wave feminism, and essentially how it's shaped our experiences as women, how far things have changed, and obviously start off with maybe hearing a little bit from you, Annie, about Fawcett Devon and the history of gaining suffrage in the UK.
Perhaps the origins of suffrage. So, back in the 19th century, there were a lot of attempts made to try and get women the vote. So lots of women became activists. Particularly important is Millicent Fawcett, who in the end founded the Fawcett Society. And she first went out in 1801, but she was very significant. And we track a path of women who believed that you needed to achieve this by going through legal means. And they were known as suffragists. And so they worked within the law, they worked with politicians, they worked with men of influence to try and gain ground. And towards the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, a group led notably by the Pankhursts, so Sybil Pankhurst and her daughters Emmeline and Christabel, felt that, this would be too slow in terms of progress. So we see the birth of the suffragette movement, where women are resorting to much more some might say violent, but let's just say much more physical, much more dynamic measures. So you see women chaining themselves to railings. You see women, as we know, tragically throwing themselves in front of horses. That's right. We see women taking much more impassioned, really taking to the streets. We see women arrested. We know that women were taken to prison. We know that they were force-fed. So lots happens. And then things move forward, and gradually, first of all, we get the vote by degrees, and eventually it leads to the point where all women, you don't have to be married, you could be single, women get the vote. So out of that was born the Fawcett Society, and it's got lots of support organisations all around the country, but the Fawcett Society is the foremost charity, but the foremost organisation for the advocacy of equality for women in the UK, and that's economic, social and political equality. And it does many things. It campaigns, it educates, it lobbies, it holds the government to account. It does an impact assessment of every policy or piece of legislature that is, that relates to or could be disadvantageous to women. It's a fantastic organisation, and it's got its roots in this very, very strong tradition of women's suffrage, and and it's so important. And I just find it ironic that at the time that Queen Victoria was on the throne, she was probably the prime opponent of women's suffrage, and yet she was the most powerful woman in the world at that point. So there you go, a little bit of the history.
Fantastic, thank you. So we've come a long way since then, yeah. How much further do you think we all need to go then with what we've already been achieved? So we've got economic equality.
People call it violent direct action, and nowadays we do more non-violent direct action. But at that time, when some people tried to, horrible, to, not only towards women but children as well. So it required, stronger measures.
It was proportionate, wasn't it?
It was well, whether it's violence towards people, violence towards property, which is a whole other area of debate.
Yeah.
I think you'll sit up and take notice rather than, because this is a group of women who felt, frankly, that the suffragist route would take years and years to achieve the same thing. Yeah.
And maybe there's almost a calling for something like that again. So in the States, there were articles about how peaceful the protest was, and you could argue, oh, that's a great thing, but however, the police didn't find women a threat, and they're, you know, and that's the issue, is they weren't taking us seriously. They're looking at us and saying, oh, these sweet little women, and blah. We're being patronized, you know, we're being patronized here because we're not taking dramatic actions. But is there a way to not have to be very direct and violent and still get our point across, and be heard and be known, and not be diminished and our flames put out because they're saying we're passive, like using peaceful but making that like more as a passive thing about us instead of, do you know what I mean there?
Do you?
I'm just thinking, it's like, because like the aims now are so much different from the first. Like from the first movement, we had very like concrete aims as feminists. Like we wanted suffrage, we wanted equality in education, we wanted equality in land ownership. Like you move on to the second wave, and we're talking about the more private domain, sexuality and gender representation and the rest of it. Like we come to the modern era where it's very much gone into the private domain. And so, like, you talk about direct action and everything else, and it's like, it's almost as I don't know, like, I mean, I don't know the march you're talking about in particular, so it's not a comment on that. If, like, it's the fact that our voice is not heard anymore. It's more of a case now that we have a lot more issues on the table, and none of them are as clear-cut anymore, because they go into the private domain. And we're talking about a culture now that really has like individualism as its place. So when you start being very forceful about things, and people go, well, hang on, I'm an individual, I think X and Y and Z, you get a lot of resistance from that. So I wonder how much is resistance from traditional power centres, and how much is resistance because like people feel that feminism is almost a label to do with your self-conception, with your identity as well, and that has to be negotiated. So you could say we need to be a bit more forceful, but then you risk people reacting to that forcefulness.
I was with a very good friend on Friday, and I said to her, I was telling her about this, that we were going to have this conversation, and she said to me, so are you a feminist? And I said, yes. And so are you? And she said, no, I'm not. And I said, oh, so I won't say who this friend is. And I said, but you want equal access of opportunity for all your children? And she said, yes. And you want them to have the choice of career that they want? And she said, yes. And you want them to be recognised and valued for their work, irrespective of their gender? Yes. I said, hate to break it to you, but you are a feminist.
but that's the thing, though, isn't it? It's like the whole definition of feminism possibly now has been wrapped up in things that are not technically the core of feminism, which is moving against
it's almost
structures.
like it becomes a dirty word, and people start saying
that.
egalitarian. But at the moment, that means pushing one gender. Perhaps,
but I think there's a lack of recognition
to the detriment
that
of the
like
other.
feminism and racism and any discrimination is referring back to the same centre of power that kind of propagates and fosters the discrimination.
Yeah, the source of oppression is the same.
So it's just the source of
But that fourth way, that was I'm not sure how that engaged. But what I understand is that the contemporary feminism is about the globalization of the movement, and also we talk more about join all the oppressions, because we understand now it's not only feminism, it's also environmentalism and human rights and animal rights people. They understand that we have to work together.
We see, don't we, the UN, one of the main sustainable goals is about gender parity, and it's not just about education, because in fact if you look at countries in the Middle East, you see that in terms of equality of education, there are almost more graduates coming out of universities in countries like Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, than male graduates. Yet, you look at women in the workplace, and the profile is almost non-existent. So
what you're doing with
so you say exactly.
You're allowed
so
to do with it.
Exactly. So you're investing all of that time, and you've got all of that brilliance, and then it comes to a dead end. And
however, you're mentioning other countries, and I think that's a power for me of these times, is that we have a more globalized movement, not only feminism, as I say, all the others, because we have internet, so we can communicate with each other. So as a Latin American, you start to talk to the suffragists about the movements in the Anglo-Saxon world, what happened in Latin America at that time. So there's a lot of lack of information and exchange or conversation, and now the global conversation is on, and now we can support each other. And for me, that's a big achievement. We have to keep it that way. And again, not only in the women's movement, but every oppression, every movement against oppression.
I know, but it's just like what we've been saying. It all centres on the same thing. So you have women like in the Middle East graduating with all these degrees and everything else, and they're losing traction because the world is set up with these structures that just don't accept things. So like
it's patriarchy.
It's the patriarchy. But I kind of hesitate to use it because some people interpret the word patriarchy as meaning like they imagine in their head somewhere a group of white men around a table who are like literally issuing edicts to the world.
That's
far gone there.
I hate to break it down.
In a sense, yes, but also it's about like the structures and the discourses within our culture that are set up clearly from this viewpoint, and not from a viewpoint that encompasses all these other people. So you can come out with your degree and your education and everything else and still meet the same kind of resistance, not in any individual or particular organisation, but just because the world isn't set up to accommodate.
But don't you think
those
that?
things.
Sorry, Gabby.
No, I was just thinking you have to think as well why women, perhaps not their intention, but in some cases their family's intention, society's intention is like, yeah, it's okay for her to study that. Are they studying engineering, technology, more feminine subjects, and are they trying to get jobs after? It's not necessarily. It's like, is it the structure that, it's all right, let her go and study art history for a few years and then she can go off and get married and she's got something to talk about at dinner parties. Which
that's why
does happen in some circles.
I think we need to reclaim certain, we use labels anyway, and I know many women who say, I'm not feminist because I don't use labels and stuff, but sorry, if you're an engineer, if you're a professor, you use those labels. If you are, a mother, you're a father, you're a Ecuadorian or not, you use labels. So if we are using labels anyway, let's use them in the right way.
I think the labels thing comes back to this idea that we are all seen as individuals now, and that this is an identity label. Maybe not.
I think the movement
to call yourself a feminist is to kind of label yourself as well. And people shy from taking on those labels and the past that comes with them.
But that's why I'm challenging that, because if we all use these labels or these flags, then use the flag in the right way. Educate yourself and push forward the justice that label.
It's not just the education of the person taking on that label, though. It's the perception of people of that label.
How do we change perception?
But we talk about it, and so that conversation, for me, it's one person at a time, and I'm person. What was very interesting last year was the theme of International Women's Day. What it reflected was the fact that the gender equality, the raring to go, the dynamism behind it is slowing down. People have seen that there's a slowing down, and I'm thinking, I'm wearing this T-shirt that says 50-50 equality. So this is the petition to get the debate on the table about equality of representation, because we're still only 32% in government. And it's stalled at about 57,000 signatures. Yet a petition to stop Donald Trump from visiting the UK gets over 100,000 names in 2 days.
There's a perception that we've achieved what we need to achieve with feminism, but I mean, existing as a woman, you come up against this all the time in your life, and yet people will turn to you and go, well, we don't need feminism now, we've done everything we need to do. It's like, when it's not an issue I have to deal with, I'll let you know.
That's exactly, that's exactly it. And someone described the government really good.
I know, I mean, I'd like, I'll speak as somebody who maybe in her younger years, like, my mum was pretty feminist. Right on, mum. She did well by me. She gave me the grounding. But maybe I rebelled against that in my earlier younger years, and I thought, well, I don't need feminism. We've done that. It will come through eventually. Blah 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 blah. And I think it's because especially in England or America or stuff, you just don't come up against it personally for a while. And it wasn't until I had children and then suddenly started hitting walls at 100 miles an hour that I suddenly realised, oh right, this is what my mother was telling me about when I was 14. I should have listened. But this is the thing, you can feel until you've had a personal experience of it. that it's very difficult to kind of wrap. When I was working with girls in schools and stuff, and I would say I was a feminist, and they were like, "Well, what will feminism do to me?" It's like, it's all well, you can talk about like pay equality, but I'm worried about actually getting a job. Like you can talk about like equality for stuff. I was very big, especially when I was teaching science, about getting girls into STEM subjects, into the sciences, and traditionally male-dominated areas. And they were like, "Yeah, well, I can go to university, but I'm worried about paying for it." And I think there's a certain level for some people where like there are bigger issues. Like, it's not like I'll get to feminism eventually, but just let me get a job and like.
But don't you think
like
that part of the job is, or part of the task is to understand that everything is correlated, and then we need to talk about it, as you say, you know. But for me, education is not only information; it's education with critical thinking. So if we start to talk about this,
it's the knowledge to make the
it's
decision.
the knowledge and be
yourself.
critical about
I
it.
think you're talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah, I mean, in a certain way, I am.
So
yes.
the bottom of the pyramid is basic things. Where do I get my identity from? But the age that we live in is that our gender is tied up with our ability to provide that basic shelter for ourselves.
Absolutely.
So it affects us at the basis
I think that's
level.
quite a subtle thing to realise, and I think it takes sometimes
disagree.
it takes a while.
I think,
I
I mean, again,
you're a
it's,
very subtle person. Some of the
it
people I
brings
meet
me
are-
back to, I mean, obviously you know about this, but like my personal experience of my male partner being the main caregiver and staying at home with my children, and me going for jobs where I would be the main money provider, and people assumed that I wouldn't be because I was female. So the idea that I would need to be paid enough to support a family, it's just like, no, you're a woman, you want a job that pays whatever, and it.
Why would you?
Yes.
I think it was 2 weeks into coming back to my job after having my first child. Somebody, and they were being very nice, was just like, "Are you sure you really want to be here? Wouldn't you rather like?" And like, it's those kind of things that you don't meet until a certain point in your life, which kind of make people feel like, "Why do I need to do this? Why do I need to do
You meet different things. I mean, I had jobs sort of before I was married. Before I had children, I had at least one look at me behind the bar, which worked to my advantage. I got the job, but literally that's why I was there.
Yeah, I think it. Yeah, sorry, Erin.
I was just. So I think the actualization and the realization of feminism can come late for a lot of women, because when you get opportunities like that, you kind of think you've got what you need, which is not right. It's not okay, but you have trouble understanding it because no one's pointed it out to you and no one's made sense. So I think that's where you're saying, like, I remember being a young woman and actually, and I'm kind of grossed out thinking about it, but, you know, and actually saying, oh, women get what they want, I can just, you know, flaunt it and get whatever I want. And that is me being ill-informed.
It's dangerous,
Hyper dangerous, but like, that's something that you have to kind of acknowledge. A lot of women haven't hit and have
and it's not
the
only
food
women,
back to that pyramid.
And it's to be honest though, I was conscious of it at the time, and I knew what I was doing. You know, I'd walk into a job interview and think, it's a man across the desk, I've got the job. Which I knew exactly what I was doing and I was using it to my advantage, but I also knew that it was wrong.
But that's the thing,
that's how the world was.
Unless that we discuss these things and unless people get informed, and I keep arguing about that we need to push for, not to, you know, in whatever way, the kindest competition for real information and communication and education, because it's not just that, you know, feminism is not an intellectual concept, it's just a reality. And I was going to talk about indigenous women in Latin America, for example. Maybe they don't have the intellectual discourse about feminism and stuff, but they are feminists. They go to the streets, and that's, you know, and we don't have food, we don't, and in Bolivia, for the big wars to recuperate the water, the state company of the water, the indigenous women went to the streets with their children and the babies, as usual. Like the Zapatista women go with their babies and at the back with their dogs, everything, because it's about life or death. And the mothers are the main, you know, the ones who look after their whole family and agriculture. And so there is the movement needs to be there, and we just need to get more informed. And men also get misinformed about what it's all about. If we let this intellectual perception of what feminism is, or if you just get angry with your boyfriend and you think that you are feminist because of that we have to have conversations and more education about it.
I think talking about men as well, I mean, this is the thing, men increasingly feel threatened by feminism.
Yeah, but that's a misinformation again.
Yeah, it is, but there's a huge backlash that's going on at the moment.
I don't
You
know.
see it
I
with
think
kind
that's
of
a bit
Harvey
50-50 though, because I've met many
situation.
like the huge backlash, but there's also quite a growing number of them who are very good allies as well. So like
There are.
the
but I think
backlash,
there always
however,
have
is
been,
more
but-
vocal
Yeah.
than you see in America. Like they're
Yeah.
literally going backwards with abortion laws and everything
Yeah.
else.
Yeah,
And it's like
today
what
was
is
horrible.
happening there?
Yeah.
You know,
But just talking about how men feel themselves, I mean, young men in particular are feeling devalued.
Feminism is
Well, no,
because
but
Yeah, I know,
patriarchy
but
is
the
proving
thing
for
is-
women, and men are feeling threatened.
but
so.
that in our society we look for something to blame or some reason for it. I find what's really interesting about Harvey Weinstein, they're
Yeah.
two things are happening. One is the victim blaming, so people
Yes.
are saying, well,
Yeah.
why didn't Angelina Jolie? The point is that Angelina Jolie now was not the Angelina Jolie then,
Yeah.
when that happened. And also, why did this person think it was okay to behave like this? And why was it suffragette colours, green, white and violet, give women the vote? Or was it green, white and purple, give women power? And I think the give women power is a much better
But, I mean,
message.
I think the thing about power is something to note. It's like when I said before that everything comes back to the same source of discrimination for whatever
It's the
discrimination.
system. The
whatever.
system. Yeah.
It's a power differential, isn't it?
It is
So, like,
a power
and
differential.
what people don't throw themselves underneath the bus and scream about like oppression when they're faced with power, especially if they feel alone.
But the people
So,
do
like-
in Latin America.
But like in different situations, I was talking more about the Harvey Weinstein situation. It's
Yeah.
like why, when faced with someone who could completely destroy your career, you don't
Yes,
scream
yes,
about
yes,
things
yes,
that
yes.
happen.
Well, you can, but there's a sense of cutting your nose off to spite your face.
And
So
even
it's
worse,
like, yeah, you can shout about it and stuff like that. There'll be a media storm for about 10 seconds, then you'll have no career and he'll carry on as before.
But even worse was this
Or be
idea that
replaced.
women and young women, especially going into the industry, were feeling that this was what they would have to put up
Yes.
with in order
Normal.
simply to be
The
able to
normalization
achieve
of
their
it,
dream.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
to me, I find that absolutely horrific
It's horrible.
because
Yeah.
if you said to a man, you're right, you've got to go in and you've got to do some sexual favours
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
you've got to
Well,
show
again,
yourself
yeah.
up.
Yeah.
you
Well, again,
know.
as I was saying with job interviews when I was sort of 19, 20, yeah, I'd go in wearing clothing that made me look more attractive if a man was interviewing me.
Yeah, yeah.
I'd get the job on those grounds, but it's like, how far do you take it? You know?
Yeah, but in the case of these women, they were abused. O sea, they
Yeah.
were tricking too. They didn't plan to go and get the job.
No.
They did, and in
Well,
most
no, but
cases
you
of
go
abuse.
into a job in that situation, you dress in a semi-provocative way, and then I've been in jobs where, it's like, how far do you let it go? It's like people chatting you up, people pinching your bum, and
Need to be
you know,
careful.
you
with-
expect that kind of thing.
Yeah, but
And
that's
you
not
do.
right,
I mean,
isn't it?
it's victim blaming, and you blame
Yes.
yourself to a certain
Yeah.
extent. But you thought, I went to the interview in a miniskirt. What do I expect?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
But
educate people that kind of behaviour is not okay. What we're actually saying is, women or girls, you have to somehow dress in a certain way, or not go certain places, or not do certain
Yes,
things.
we have to
The
restrict,
message
yes.
is completely cockeyed to me.
Yeah.
We really, I think this one good thing this government has done is it's opened up the debate about age-appropriate sex and relationship education. Hurrah for that. So
Yeah.
let's start saying respectful and genuine and real relationship between a boy and a girl, between a male and a female, whatever the age,
Whatever the relationship is.
and get that respect, in my view, between certain groups of men towards lots of people, but towards women. Actually, there's a profound lack of respect from a lot of different groups towards a lot of
Yeah.
different groups. But what we're talking, and I think you're right, there's a power differential, and I think there is a big respect differential too. You know.
Yeah.
Massive. We were trying to kind of you told me like what does feminism mean. It was going to be like the main part of the chat, and for me, I realized that every person gets the right to have their individuality and be able to be proud of that with no limits, no kind of societal pressures and things like that. And I think sex education needs to come a lot younger, and we need to start, like, everyone who works with elementary school children needs to start choosing their words a lot wiser, and they need
Yeah.
to start
Yeah,
providing
Definitely.
courses. I'm only a dinner lady, but I have young men and women, and I'm constantly trying to get the young women to be brave and risky and daring on, you know, just doing backflips on bars and things like that. And I'm trying to encourage the young men, because I see them and I see other people saying shake it off, but then when a young woman falls, oh, come here, you know. And I always ask everyone who gets hurt, do you want a hug, and to embrace it. And if I see them sad, I come over and I try and, especially young men, I try and get them to work out their feelings and to start talking and things like that. And it goes back to that one at a time thing you said, and those moments, like, it's hard to make giant changes across the entire world, but it's so great when you can take the time and always be cognizant of, like, every moment you have, trying to choose. And I don't choose every word properly because I've grown up in this system, but most of the things I do, I take every second to really you know, process it and make sure I'm giving the most nurturing, best environment that is completely neutral and helping.
And accepting. Yeah.
I mean, I feel 2 points like, it's like, what, you know, like, what does feminism mean? Like, I would take it even a bit further. It's like the knowledge to make the choice, that when you engage and when you don't engage with certain practices and behaviours, that you understand what you're doing. But, like, just as a complete aside, and I'm sorry to do this, it's just being in education, right? So much is placed on educators' laps. Like, when I was in schools, like, so much was brought to us, like, but everybody needs to make the conversation. If just schools and formal environments are making this conversation, it's not going to work. They need to go home and hear a parallel conversation. They need to go out into the world and hear a parallel conversation. Because we literally can't. Yeah. I've run umpteen girls groups. I've run umpteen, and the thing is, like, they're hearing it just from me, and I'm their teacher, and I'm really easy to pitch
to be consistent.
You know, I went to see a school about running in an area of Birmingham which A is very socially deprived and B has a very high social deprivation rating, and it has a lot of families that are Bangladeshi, you know, a lot of, it's got a big highly diverse community. And this educator who ran this particular establishment, he said, we're trying to get to the mothers because it's through the mothers that we get to educate the kids, and it's through the mothers that the kids become socialised and they learn the social norms. And I thought, I'd never thought of it like that. I'm not a mother, and that doesn't mean I'm ignorant to what mothers do. But I thought that was such a key thing, you know. Because
it's been said a lot.
Again, it's like saying you've got to get them in education. You've got to, like, so many groups now, like, target mothers and women in order to get to the children and the rest of it. And I feel that at a certain level, they're just bypassing part of the problem. Which is like, well, just like, fathers are really hard to reach. They won't engage with us, so we won't engage with them.
Yeah, but don't you think that we need to start somewhere?
Yeah, we need to start somewhere. But we've started somewhere from the 1970s. Like, it's 30.
Okay, so we've all said that men feel. We've all said that men feel threatened by feminism, but if we start to normalize it and get them on board with feminism, because it works for them too, you know, them being
think
more
there is,
anti-patriarchal
I will say
practices.
that I do think there's quite a lot of men who are on board with feminism.
I know what you mean, but like, so with
but maybe they should talk up a bit more.
Yeah.
Because, like, you tend to find out a man, like, is quite a good ally quietly in private, individually.
There should be more vocal.
I mean, that's what we have to look at. Well,
subtle ways. So I'm thinking of people I work alongside, men I work alongside, who simply practice what they preach, which according to, you know, the skills that you have, your gender doesn't feature in the conversations that they have with you about the workplace. It's never an issue about whether you can do your job or not, whether you can do your job or not. I work with a lot of men like that, and it's really encouraging. And I have some friends who have that kind of who have that kind of approach as well. It's the hard to reach groups who don't want to change because they feel that the change will somehow take something away from them. And I think that's a big issue. And what we're trying to say is actually this won't take anything away from you. It will simply increase the choice.
We're coming to the end of our live chat session. We've heard from Claire, who added a comment, women essentially being the kind of main role as carers, and I think that comes into that mutual responsibility for people, you know, in society taking on those different roles, and that normalisation issue that a lot of the time women are taking on the majority of those day-to-day tasks that are occurring in families or even in businesses and jobs. And those sorts of responsibilities aren't kind of being equalised out. Have any of you got a final closing statement that you would like to share? We're just running over 30 minutes now, but the conversation was outstanding, so I did not want to finish it.
I'm just trying not to. So, yeah.
So, I mean,
So
what is our next move, and how do we education and the conversation with men, trying to reach out to men and get them to, like we said, normalize it, understand that it is beneficial to them as well, and that they can be crucial, you know, to this process and helping, and that it's going to benefit everyone, including themselves. Trying to get them to probably not have shame around it, because I think a lot of men, why they're independent about it, why they're nervous to speak up, is because they know they will get bashed for not being a man because of how they respect feminism, and that is hard, you know.
For being feminist. I mean,
well, yeah, of course, but like we, you know, that's why we normalize it, so they know what they're doing is right, and they have a safe place, and that they're our allies, and they're helping us move forward, and they're going to make the world a better place by helping and being part of it.
Anybody else want to make a closing
Last
statement
conclusion,
from our
last
guests?
statement?
I just wanted to quote Barack Obama when he said women are not a minority interest group, they're 1/2 of the population. And finally to say, you know, we don't have to set out to conquer the world, we can do it one person at a time. And it's just offering an alternative viewpoint and giving someone the chance to make that mindset and paradigm shift. I think that's really important.
I think I'd just like to harp back to the idea that like it is about the knowledge to make an informed choice about how you lived your life when you know you're engaged, when you know you're not. So, like, part of that is part of what we need to do to move forward as well. Give people the power to choose.
Fantastic.
yeah, I just particularly with reference to the feminism that we have today is there's a big discrepancy between what people say and what they'll admit to in public and what they actually do in their lives, and I think that's something we need to address, how people actually behave.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah, I just think that it's a good time to join forces around the world and with all the struggles. So feminism is part of that movement, and let's do it.
Fantastic. And you know, talking about all of the different things that are impacting our lives and what social structures are actually causing them, and us evaluating how we want to change those structures. Genuinely, we have the power to do that. So I want to say a massive thank you to our guests tonight. Thank you all for contributing. And until next time, thank you very much.
Yay.
Bye.